And next we have a presentation of the ADA Task Force, the report out of recommendations by Jason Jones.
You guys hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Maybe a little bit closer, Jason. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, I'm Jason Jones. I'm a faculty member at the University of Kentucky's Human Development Institute. This is my counterpart, Christina Espinosa-Bard, who's also a faculty member at UK. Early last year, or I guess end of last year, I should say, early this year, during a Mayor's Council on Disability, which I'm not a member of, or was not a member of at the time, there was some discussion. They asked us to come in and talk about some accessibility issues in Lexington. During that presentation, Councilman Maloney and Councilmember Henson both came up with the idea of sort of forming a task force on your behalf to kind of get together and put some key members together and come up with some recommendations how we could make Lexington a little more accessible for people with disabilities and actually for people for a lot of reasons based on universal design. We met 5 or 6 different times during the year. We formed some ad hoc committees, and we completed our recommendations by your request on October 1st. These were the members. I would like to say for sure that everybody that needed to be in that room just about was there. I'm not sure if that ever happens in government. I worked in state government for almost 20 years, and it's a rare thing to get everybody that you need there. But you can read the members that were on here. Everybody was integral to this committee. We had everybody show up pretty much for every meeting, and a lot of input from a lot of people, and it was phenomenal. As you can see, some of the members from the fire marshal was there, building code was there, legal services, the ADA coordinator for the city, several council members popped in and out, and it was phenomenal. And on that note, I'd like to thank Peggy and Richard for their leadership. It was an easy group to lead, I will say for sure. And I'd also like to acknowledge Angela Evans, who is my council member and has been also very helpful over the years in pushing forward some things that we needed to look at in Lexington. So if we can, we'll start with the 10 recommendations, and I know we want to go quickly through these. Number 1 is establish the ADA Task Force as a permanent advisory committee to the council. We realized during the process that with all the key players in place, how much accessibility changes with new amendments to the federal law and the ability to change state law and local ordinance as well, that these things move quite quickly, and to have a task force that meets, to appoint a new task force every 5 to 10 years really doesn't do it. We met more on a monthly to bi-monthly basis. I think a quarterly basis would be fine, but I recommend that we do not eliminate the ADA task force after this. Number 2 is increase the capacity of the ADA's coordinator, city's ADA coordinator, or a designee to do sign-offs of new commercial construction permits submitted to the Division of Building Inspection. Dewey Crow was on our group, and what we realized is that currently there's not a mandatory signature. There's a meeting of new contracts that come through, where contractors bring new building plans to the city for the building code inspection, and there are a whole line of people that have to sign off on those. There's not someone that currently signs off for accessibility. Accessibility is a law, the same as anything else. The sewers have to sign off, the fire marshal has to sign off, traffic has to sign off. There's a whole list of people that have to sign off. We started attending those meetings because we started sending a representative to those meetings just to be there to answer questions or to help builders and contractors if they had questions about accessibility. And what we found, or what we feel like would be much more beneficial, is if those plans were all looked at, because we realize the buildings built in recent times are not accessible to the extent that the law says they should be. I think that was some of the outrage by Councilmember Maloney in the first part of this, was that we have buildings in the city that are less than 10 years old, some less than 5 years old, that were not built correctly. We can eliminate that problem if we get involved in the plan before the first stone is ever laid in place or the first scoop of dirt is ever taken. So that would be our second recommendation.
And our third recommendation is to require that all inspectors within the Division of Building Inspection be certified on ICC accessibility. And that just links to the section of the KBC, the Kentucky Building Code, that addresses all of the accessibility features. It's the standard accessibility in usable buildings and facilities section. And then along with that, we ask that inspectors be required a minimum of 3 hours of ADA or accessibility training as part of their annual CEU requirements.
The next one is increase or allocate funding to the Lexington Human Rights Commission to go towards accessibility assessments and enforcement. One thing that we learned during the process was that the HRC is the enforcement arm of the ADA, which means if someone has a complaint in the local government, they can go to the HRC, lodge a complaint, and the HRC will follow up with that. The real honest problem with that is the HRC currently has 5 full-time employees, and only 2 of those are certified inspectors. So they really don't have the capacity to do that. Although I would have to say Ray Sexton and his group have been phenomenal in that when they get those calls, they follow up on them, and a lot of things have already been changed, especially in the realm of parking. But the unfortunate truth is that there's not enough people to enforce those and to go out and actually make those accessibility checks. You have to understand when a call comes in like that, someone has to physically go to the site, do an assessment, and then contact the building owner or the owner of the business in order to move that forward. Number 5, we perform a complete review of the city's current ADA transition plan. Under Title II of the ADA, it is a requirement of each municipality, city government, to have an ADA transition plan. We have one, but it's about 15 to 20 years old. Obviously, I don't know if any of you all were on the council 15 or 20 years ago, but a lot of things have changed in the last 15 to 20 years, and it is time to update that document. It is the law, and it needs to be done. It could be done on a contractual base, so no city government employee would have to spend the time to do that. People from Independence Place and the University of Kentucky have all done the training in order to be able to do those assessments. That would be a possible way to go. Leverage the city's public relation resources to design a PSA campaign. I think most of the time people want to do the right thing, they just don't know what the right thing is. A couple years ago we had an issue with snow removal, and I think once we worked with Angela and a couple of the rest of you all, and once people knew that they shouldn't plow their snow into accessible parking spots and onto ramps, they kind of stopped doing it in a lot of instances. So it's really just an educational thing. So if we could leverage the city's public relations group to do some PSAs and do some outreach and those kinds of things, it would be very helpful. Number 7 is create a voluntary accessibility certification for business owners in Lexington. You could call it something like Access Lexington. And it works well with the Livable Lexington project that I think you all are very aware of. Lexington is a very progressive city. There's no reason in the world why we shouldn't be leading in accessibility and not trying to catch up with other places. I would say just the formation of this task force has been a really big step forward in that process. And I know I have friends in Louisville who are very jealous that we got our city council to actually look at this, so I really appreciate that. But this certification will be voluntary by businesses. It would give us a chance to provide training on access and employment, customer engagement with people with disabilities and disability awareness. It would be something like a sticker in the window like the Better Business Bureau once somebody was certified. Program could run at almost a zero cost. Number 8, search and apply for community improvement grants. We were lucky enough to have Susie Loveday on our group, and she has had some very good ideas about some ways we could chase some public money out there and maybe even leverage some private money to do some community improvement grants based on accessibility. And number 9, which we've already got in the process, is to develop a top 10 list. Our fire marshal, Michael Farmer, said early on if they just had a small card with 10 suggestions on it for when their inspectors go into businesses, they could nail it right away and they would have quick access. So we are in process. We've already developed the list and we just need to get it printed and out to those members that do those inspections. And finally, the reg changes. We have a list of reg changes that we've sent up to state government at the Division of Building Inspection there, and I'll let Christina talk about that real quick before we wrap up.
So we submitted 2 residential code changes and 2 commercial code changes. The residential ones included blocking in bathrooms, and when you're blocking in bathrooms, you're using scrap material, so it's a very low cost to no cost addition to the build, but it can allow for blocking of grab bars, of towel bars, and we know that one of our most vulnerable rooms in a residential setting is a bathroom where you can slip and fall or not have what you need to grab onto. So it would be a really minimal cost. and have a great cost savings over the life of the residents. And the second residential code change we submitted was to require that egress doors have a clear net opening width of 32 inches. That aligns with the ADA, and it also aligns with the Kentucky Housing Corporation's universal design standards. But it provides a minimum egress for emergency evacuations, and also just increases access to a greater number of Kentuckians, especially as we all have heard the stats around our aging population, in addition to Kentucky having a higher rate of disability than most other states. And then in the commercial code, we submitted one that discusses partial change of occupancy. We really just clarified the language to say that a partial change of occupancy shall have at least one accessible building entrance, at least one accessible route from the accessible entrance to primary function areas. So this change just provides clarity to builders of what the ADA requirements are, and it helps minimize violations and feasibility exceptions, and results in an increase in access to commerce and economic participation and employment, and just in full inclusion. And our second commercial code submission was to increase the 20% rule to 25% of the cost of alterations affecting the primary function area, and then establish an order of priority. So a lot of times what happens is that without an order of priority, people will put that money towards bathroom modifications where there's not an accessible route into the building or an accessible entrance into the building. So this is not nearly as functional or usable. So if we are able to just clarify the order of priority from parking to the route to the entrance being fully accessible, and then the route to the altered area before we're doing things like bathrooms and water fountains, it results in improved functional access to the building with each alteration that occurs.
And if you think about the idea that if you can get out of your car and you've got this beautiful, lovely, accessible bathroom that's huge and easy to use, but there's no way to get up to the curb to get into the restaurant, you might as well not even have a bathroom at all. So the point is accessibility from the time you get out of your vehicle until the time that you're patronizing the place until the time that you leave. So real quick before I take questions, I just want to say many of the members of our task force are here today. I just want to personally thank them for the work that they've done. We did a lot of work and had a lot of great input, and I just appreciate the council giving us this opportunity, and I think there's no reason in the world why Lexington should not be the most accessible city in the country, or at least give it a try. So, do y'all have any questions?
Thanks, Jason. Thanks very much. All right, let's ask for questions and or comments. Councilmember Lamb.
Thank you, and I applaud my colleagues, council members Henson and Stennett for this, not Stennett, Maloney, sorry. I really appreciate everybody's efforts in bringing all this forward. About 18 years ago, I came into my mother, who's 87, has post-polio, and so she always had to go into a situation where she had to go into a scooter, and it has been an eye-opener for me. I drove her out to California and in her ramp van, and it was an education about the hotel rooms and just being able to access restaurants. And you can't just go into the cute little quaint restaurants to eat because you can't get into them.
Right.
You can't go shopping. So I am excited and thrilled that you all have brought this forward. Something that I wrote lots of notes, and I promise I won't go over them all, but the voluntary accessibility certification for business owners in Lexington, I don't know if Mary Quinn Raymer is here or if she hears this, but I would like for you guys to work with our Visit Lex so that people could go to our website and be able to find out where are accessible restaurants and events that people can actually go to when they come to Lexington and visit. I think it's very important that we work with Visit Lex and make us that progressive and the most accessible city in the United States. The other thing is that as far as parking, and you talked about the public service announcements, I think one of the most frustrating things that my mom deals with is that when she goes and she parks somewhere in a handicap ramp van accessible parking space, and she goes in and then she comes out and someone is parked over the dadgum lines and she can't get in her van because she's by herself, and so she has to go back in the store. And so what I would like to see us have is have some PSA about bringing that to attention, because if you say something to somebody, they just didn't think about it.
Yeah, they didn't know.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right, and they just don't think about it. And until you have experienced it personally, you don't get it. And so I think that's something that needs to be brought in. And the other thing is I know that this resolution expressing the support is in our packet today. I would like for us to add in there the Kentucky delegates, the legislative delegates, because we need to notify them that, because they're going to have to approve of these, and so we need to make sure that we notify them and say, hey, please push this forward because of the level of importance of it. Again, I just think it's outstanding what you all have brought forward today. And anything I can do going forward, I'll be right there with you on it. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Lamb. Councilmember Evans.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start by saying thank you as well. Yeah, I think probably one of the first phone calls I got, was when we had the first snow in my first term, and you recall, yes, we were baptized by snow. And that was one of the first issues that I came across. And you're right, I don't think people just don't think about that. So I appreciate you educating me on that. But I had a question about the number 3, I guess, in the recommendations, because licensure and certification is kind of my background. So are our inspectors currently getting certification hours, or what would that entail for employees? I'm just a little curious about it.
Yeah. Accessibility certification. So Cash is actually our expert on what that certification requires. He's attained it. They are currently getting some accessibility training, but there's nothing required. So they even in their annual CEUs, I know they have some people who have trained on accessibility, but there's nothing that's required there, and certainly not on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so there's the option, but now we just asking to make it a requirement as part of their CEUs.
From what I understood, it's more of an elective than it is a requirement.
Okay.
So they have a choice of some things that they can sort of specialize in or get that certificate or that training. And so that's one of the things they can choose.
Okay.
So it's kind of like an elective, and it's basket weaving if that's what you want to do.
Okay. It is. All right. Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Henson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jason, for being here. Thank Christina and everyone. I was just wanting to, if you would raise your hand, if you served on this task force. I think you are a great group of folks, and we've got Dewey back there, and we've got a lot that aren't here, but all the efforts that went into this are much appreciated. And Jason, your leadership for chairing this group, they were rowdy, I believe. But I was going to walk on this resolution at tonight's council meeting. I intended for this to go to our state legislators, so we'll make those amendments and I'll bring them up tonight. I was hoping that we can get this passed before we go on break, because of the state legislature will probably start up before we return. So, but thank you. And as for the other recommendations, I think that while we're on break, I'm going to research it a little bit and try to determine the best way to move those forward. And then if there is, which I'm assuming there will be, another task force meeting, and we may have to change the name of it, but then I will provide you an update and we can have some discussion. So, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Henson. Councilmember Maloney.
I too want to thank Jason and Christie for their hard work, and all the board members from the ADA. We sometimes get lucky, and we got very lucky. Is when we first started this project, especially with going to the state. The state was putting their updating their 2012 building codes, and we happened to be putting it together, and we got very lucky. I knew some people down there, so we went down there. We didn't have to get up in front of anybody. They just kind of looked at us and went on and let it go through. So, but we still have to get with our legislators, because once this goes to Frankfurt for regs and all next year, we're going to have to make sure that our legislators know how important this is to this community. And I do commend what you all put together, and I think a lot of this stuff, and going back to the ADA, hiring somebody for buildings, and I think Dewey and I have talked about this, that it's very important that we have this, because there have been times that buildings have been built, and you all know when you walk through or you go through, you don't have that right size, right everything. And code enforcement, building inspection can look at so much. They're looking at the basic buildings, but when you get an ADA, they're looking at everything. They're looking at the things that building inspection can't look at all the time, because they got with all these plans coming in, they got so many days to get them out. Sometimes they rush things through, and it's part of it, but we put an ADA person there, we do it right. And it still can go through the same time, it's just you have another eyes looking at something that's very important. So we need to have that. We never had that before, and I think it's very important that we do that, and for the quality of Lexington. And I think this ADA test, this is just the beginning. There's a lot of other things that we're doing, we're excited about, and I want to commend Peggy Henson. She has been on this board for a long time, and he put me on the board, which I'm glad. The mayor put me on the board, which I'm glad he did too. So thank you, Mayor. But I do want to commend you all for all what you've done. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Fred Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I think this was a good presentation, and I want to piggyback a little bit on this because we're addressing this in the aging population, because I'm on the Senior Services Commission, and we talk about what we have now out there and trying to get the information out about a livable Lexington. And this, you all should be part of this. I don't know if you've corresponded with our aging group, the Bluegrass Ad, and that group, but if not, we need to have some connectivity there, because what we're looking at on livable Lexington is to have these model homes built for the aging population, and to make the halls wider and the doors wider and the access to get in with wheelchairs, because the aging population are certainly in that ballpark, or they're using canes or walkers and things of that nature. So this is, really a good connection here, and I didn't know if you all really looked into the aging population.
Yes,
or
absolutely.
that.
For
I'm part of Livable Lexington as well.
Okay, great. So that's good. We can make it all come
Absolutely,
together.
right. The
Thank you.
universal design principles apply to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I believe that's all that's signed on. Thank you all again so much for your presentation, and for all your colleagues who are here with you tonight as well this afternoon. Thank you all.